May 28, 1940, Reichswehr Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring tossed the latest intelligence report onto his desk with visible disdain. The document outlined President Franklin D. Roosevelt's bold request to Congress, an unprecedented plan to expand America's aircraft production to 50,000 planes a year. "The Americans are fools if they think such propaganda will intimidate us," Göring scoffed to his staff. "They know nothing about real war production. Let them try converting their car factories. They'll soon learn that building airplanes takes far more than assembly lines." But Göring was wrong. In Detroit, a Danish-born industrial genius named William Knudsen was already proving him mistaken. The former General Motors president, now serving as Roosevelt's production chief for $1 a year, was quietly leading the greatest industrial transformation in human history. Within just 4 years, America's factories would surpass every expectation, not the impossible 50,000 aircraft Göring mocked, but nearly 100,000 planes every single year. Would you like me to make this version narration ready, with pacing, tone notes, and voiceover cues, for a YouTube documentary or historical short? While fighting wars across 2 oceans, America faced a challenge no nation had ever attempted before, supplying 2 theaters of war simultaneously. The statement that drew German ridicule came on May 16, 1940, as German panzers thundered through France. Standing before Congress, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." Even America's allies reacted with disbelief. In 1939, the United States had produced only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps possessed just 1,700 combat planes, many already obsolete. Yet Roosevelt was calling for a 14-fold increase in production. The man chosen to make that miracle happen was William Knudsen, a Danish immigrant and former president of General Motors. When asked who could possibly meet Roosevelt's impossible demand, advisor Bernard Baruch replied simply, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen gave up his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted country for $1 a year, bringing the principles of automotive mass production into the world of aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began almost overnight. By December 1941, American factories were producing 2,000 military aircraft each month, a 20-fold increase in just 2 years. The Ford Motor Company broke ground on a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its facilities in Seattle, while Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was awakening, and the Nazi leadership's arrogance toward American industry was about to become one of their greatest miscalculations. Germany's fatal misjudgment of America's industrial power was rooted in racial prejudice and willful blindness. Between 1933 and 1941, General Friedrich von Bottcher, the Wehrmacht's military attaché in Washington, sent detailed and accurate reports describing the scale of American industrial mobilization. In December 1940, one of his cables warned bluntly, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." But in Berlin, those warnings were dismissed as defeatist nonsense. When Bottcher met Adolf Hitler in February 1939 to discuss U.S. capabilities, the Führer exploded into a rant about so-called American racial decay instead of listening to intelligence. He sneered that Americans were half Judaized, half negrified, and therefore incapable of sustained warfare. That ideological blindness would prove catastrophic. The arrogance ran deep. Luftwaffe intelligence mocked reports of women entering aircraft factories, calling it a sign of American desperation. They could not imagine that a democratic nation, driven by civic unity rather than command, might outproduce the Nazi war machine itself. Even when reports arrived of U.S. factories running 3 shifts a day, German analysts simply dismissed them as exaggeration. It was a fatal miscalculation, one that would define the outcome of the war. The Nazi worldview simply couldn't comprehend American reality. Nothing captured that better than Ford's Willow Run plant, a monument to American ambition and industrial genius. Built on open farmland beginning April 18, 1941, Willow Run became the largest factory in the world under one roof, spanning 3.5 million square feet, with an assembly line stretching over a mile long. Ford's legendary production chief, Charles Sorensen, made an audacious promise. "We'll build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every hour." At the time, other factories were struggling to finish even one per day. At first, the results were disastrous. The first completed bomber in September 1942 had to be entirely rebuilt. Quality control failures reached 50%, and by February 1943, Willow Run was producing just 56 bombers a month, far short of expectations. Critics sneered and called it "Will It Run?" But the engineers refused to quit. They broke the B-24's 488,193 parts into modular sub-assemblies, invented hydraulic riveting tools, developed prefabricated wiring harnesses, and pioneered moving assembly lines for heavy aircraft. Even as 578 design changes were introduced in 1943 alone, production kept climbing. By September 1943, the factory was producing 148 bombers per month. By December, output had more than doubled to 365. The true breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run rolled out 428 B-24s in a single month, one bomber every 63 minutes, running 24 hours a day. This one American factory was now outproducing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first realized the scale of America's industrial power during the Tunisia campaign, and it was a shock that would haunt them for the rest of the war. By late 1942, German pilots were beginning to grasp a grim truth. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-77, wrote in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." That realization only deepened as 1943 unfolded. On January 27th, the United States launched its first air raid on Germany itself, 64 bombers striking the port city of Wilhelmshaven. By October, during the infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt, the U.S. 8th Air Force could lose 60 B-17s in a single day and replace them within 2 weeks. The mathematics of war had become undeniable. During Big Week, February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted more than 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft factories. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but far worse, around 100 of its most experienced pilots, men who could never be replaced. General Adolf Göring warned Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters a month while producing barely 1,000. At the same time, America was building 2,500 fighters every month, losing only 400 in combat. Even Germany's top aces began to see the hopeless scale of it all. Major Heinz Bahr, with over 220 victories, recalled a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. The air war over Europe had shifted, and Germany's defeat was now only a matter of time. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached staggering proportions. That single year, U.S. factories turned out 96,270 aircraft, including 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. In 1 year, the United States produced more planes than Germany managed during the entire war, roughly 94,677 aircraft in total. But the difference wasn't just in quantity, it was in quality. Each American bomber bristled with 13.50 caliber machine guns, carrying thousands of rounds. By contrast, many German fighters were forced to launch with partial ammunition loads due to shortages. To be everywhere, all at once. American bombers featured powered gun turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation systems, while German aircraft often took off with malfunctioning radios and outdated instruments. In Seattle, Boeing's Plant 2 was producing 16 B-17 Flying Fortresses every day by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, which had employed only 68 people in 1936, had grown to 167,000 workers across 9 plants by 1944. North American Aviation rolled out 500 P-51 Mustangs per month, and Lockheed produced a P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, implementing over 2,100 combat-driven design improvements in the process. Supporting industries moved in lockstep with this pace. General Motors built 57,658 aircraft engines, while Packard produced 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines under license. Alcoa's aluminum output surged by 600%, and Dow Chemical's magnesium production exploded from 6 million to 333 million pounds annually. Perhaps the most revolutionary transformation occurred on the factory floor. The American workforce itself changed forever. In 1941, Women made up less than 1% of aircraft workers. By 1943, they represented 65% of the industry, over 310,000 women building the machines of war. At Douglas Long Beach, 22,338 of 41,562 employees were women. And at Ford's Willow Run, Roswell Monroe, the real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, drove more than 3,000 rivets per shift with 99.5% accuracy. The arsenal of democracy had become a living force, powered not just by machines, but by millions of determined hands that refused to stop. At Douglas Aircraft, women inspectors reduced defect rates from 3.2% to just 0.3%, an achievement that stunned industry veterans. Ford Motor Company even redesigned tools to better fit smaller hands, unintentionally increasing efficiency across the board. Lighter pneumatic tools cut worker fatigue, while improved workstation layouts reduced injuries and boosted output. Yet in Berlin, German intelligence saw something entirely different. They misread the rise of women workers as a sign of American desperation. One captured Luftwaffe report dismissed them as temporary labor, predicting an inevitable collapse in quality. But the opposite happened. Precision improved. Women excelled in intricate wiring, instrument assembly, and inspection work, areas demanding patience and fine attention to detail. Their contribution became a symbol of democratic strength, not weakness. While American production soared, Germany retreated further into delusion. In February 1944, Hermann Göring approved the Jager fighter program, ordering aircraft production to be dispersed into 729 underground facilities staffed with slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone employed over 60,000 prisoners, working in brutal, inhuman conditions where more than 20,000 perished. These underground plants became factories of misery, not efficiency. Sabotage was rampant. Transporting parts between scattered sites caused endless delays. Quality control disintegrated. The entire Mittelwerk complex produced fewer engines per month than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American innovation was accelerating faster than ever. Boeing revolutionized aircraft manufacturing with modular B-29 Superfortress production, spread across 4 massive facilities, each building fully interchangeable components. The pressurized B-29, costing around $65,000 apiece, embodied technology so advanced that Germany never matched it, not even in experimental prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 B-29s every month, each one a flying symbol of industrial mastery. Then came June 6, 1944, D-Day. The scale of American production reached its ultimate expression. That morning, the Allies deployed 11,590 aircraft against just 319 German sorties, a staggering 36-to-1 advantage. This was no longer a tactical edge. It was industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, the Allied air campaign dropped 145,000 tons of bombs on German targets, more than Germany had dropped on Britain throughout the entire war. During the invasion, transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, individual raids involved 1,200 bombers, escorted by 900 fighters. The P-51 Mustang now dominated the skies, with the range to reach Poland, performance to rival any German aircraft, and numbers so vast that losses no longer mattered. German pilots gave them a single, bitter nickname, the Indians, because they seemed. As defeat closed in, even the Nazi leadership began to face reality. In December 1944, Joseph Goebbels wrote despairingly in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem like criminal delusions. We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with nothing but courage, and courage alone is not enough." Even Germany's own commanders could no longer hide from reality. Before D-Day, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel warned his staff, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy, and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will bring such material superiority that no position can hold." By January 1945, even Hitler himself privately conceded the truth. Speaking to his inner circle, he admitted, "We should have listened to Boutich's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." After the war, Albert Speer, Germany's Minister of Armaments, confirmed the devastating impact of America's industrial and strategic bombing campaign. He testified that American air attacks had reduced tank production by 35%, aircraft output by 31%, and truck manufacturing by 42%. Spee stated bluntly, "The American bombing, executed through a systematic assault on industrial targets, caused the final breakdown of German armaments." Desperate for a miracle, Germany turned to technology. The Mi-262 jet fighter, which entered limited service in mid-1944, was a genuine leap forward, more than 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied aircraft. Hitler and Göring believed this Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapon, could restore air superiority despite overwhelming numerical inferiority. But reality crushed those hopes as well. Germany produced only 1,430 Mi-262s in total, with no more than 200 ever operational at once. The engines demanded overhaul after just 10 hours of flight, and shortages of critical materials forced the use of inferior substitutes, further crippling performance. The jet that was supposed to save the Reich became instead a symbol of its collapse. Brilliant innovation buried beneath the weight of industrial defeat. While Germany placed its final hopes on the Mi-262, America had already begun its own jet revolution as early as 1942. The first attempt, the Bell P-59 era Comet, was underpowered and quickly outclassed by German designs. But progress didn't stop there. Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, developed in record time, was faster, more reliable, and superior to any German jet, and crucially, it entered production before the war ended. This was the defining difference. American industry had the depth and flexibility to pursue multiple experimental programs at once, jet propulsion, radar, long-range bombers, without slowing mass production of proven weapons. Germany could innovate, but it couldn't produce. In total war, quality without quantity is defeat disguised as brilliance. For all its engineering genius, the Third Reich simply couldn't match the scale of American output. Thousands of fighters, bombers, and tanks rolling off assembly lines faster than Germany could destroy them. When Hermann Göring was captured on May 8, 1945, by soldiers of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division, he still clung to delusion. At the interrogation center in Augsburg, he insisted that German technology had been superior, that the Reich had been overwhelmed only by numbers. But as the months passed and he was transferred to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, where Allied intelligence interrogated Nazi leadership in depth, even Göring began to falter. By July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler's interviews recorded a striking shift. Göring's reluctant admission that it wasn't German courage or science that failed, but Germany's inability to outbuild, outproduce, and outlast the industrial power of the United States. The war of machines was decided long before the last shot was fired. "I always knew American industrial potential was vast," Göring confessed to Major Heckler, "but the execution, it exceeded my worst fears. That one factory, Willow Run, produced more aircraft than our entire bomber fleet at its peak. It was beyond comprehension." What stunned him most wasn't just production, it was logistics. "Your ability to supply armies across 2 oceans," Göring said, "while still expanding production at home, this was something we could not even imagine. We struggled to sustain forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied entire armies 5,000 miles from America." At Nuremberg, prosecutors confronted Göring with the full weight of those numbers. Charts revealed that by 1944, America built more aircraft in a single month than Germany produced in an entire year. Newsreels of Willow Run's endless assembly lines flickered across the courtroom, while prosecutors listed the German cities reduced to rubble by bombers born from that single plant. During his testimony on March 14, 1946, Göring's arrogance began to crack. "I believed the United States had exceptional economic and technical potential," he admitted. "But I never imagined they could expand aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Even the prison psychologist, G.M. Gilbert, recorded Göring's quiet astonishment. A man once so confident in the Reich's invincibility, now forced to confront a truth his ideology had blinded him to. That in modern war, factories win battles, and industry decides empires. Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert recorded Göring's growing obsession with numbers. He spent hours scribbling figures, comparing single American factories to all of Germany's output. Again and again, he returned to the same name, Willow Run. "That damned factory," he muttered, "it broke our backs." When confronted with the final statistics, 812,615 American aircraft engines built against Germany's 241,675, Göring fell silent. There was nothing left to argue. The numbers themselves were the verdict. The sheer scale of America's transformation still defies belief. From producing just 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States delivered 295,959 by war's end, including 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and nearly 100,000 other aircraft. This was not merely quantity, it was systemic superiority. Design, at its peak, 2 million Americans labored in aircraft production, engineers, mechanics, and an army of women who had stepped from homes and farms into hangars and factories, forging the arsenal that would end the Axis dream of domination. It was a workforce unlike any the world had ever seen. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, the disabled, the elderly, even teenagers. In every factory and on every assembly line, America's diversity became its greatest weapon. This was democratic mobilization, a voluntary unity that achieved what totalitarian command could not. Where others coerced labor, America inspired participation. And the result was unmatched productivity, precision, and innovation. The men and women who entered those factories in 1941 knowing nothing of aviation emerged in 1945 as the most skilled aircraft builders on Earth. They didn't just assemble planes, they reinvented manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control, born from bomber production, became a global standard. Automation methods pioneered at Willow Run spread to every major industry. The engineers who built bomber lines would one day design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s would raise children who walked on the moon. The miracle of production didn't end with victory, it defined the American century. Financially, it was equally staggering. Aircraft production alone consumed $45 billion in wartime dollars, nearly $800 billion today. Yet it was an investment that reshaped not only the war's outcome, but the modern world itself. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project, yet instead of bankrupting America, it transformed the nation into an engine of prosperity. War production didn't drain the economy, it revitalized it. Unemployment, which had crippled the Depression decade, vanished overnight. Between 1940 and 1945, personal income doubled. Workers themselves financed much of the expansion through war bonds. At Willow Run alone, employees purchased $45 million in bonds, funding the very factory where they worked. Germany faced the opposite fate. By 1944, the Reich devoted 40% of its total industrial capacity to aircraft production, yet still produced less than half of America's output. Their reliance on slave labor proved disastrous. Sabotage spread, quality collapsed, and productivity per worker fell sharply after 1943. In contrast, American productivity soared, tripling in just 3 years. Every innovation, every machine, every process designed for war became the foundation for post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters built for bombers later produced materials for suburban homes. Chemical plants that once refined aviation fuel created the plastics revolution. Machine tool factories that armed the air war retooled America for global industrial dominance. But beyond raw production lay something greater, organizational genius. The ability to coordinate thousands of suppliers, millions of workers, and countless innovations into one unified system. That system didn't just win the war. It reshaped the modern world. The War Production Board coordinated over 184,000 companies with astonishing precision. IBM punchcard machines tracked millions of parts moving through thousands of suppliers, a vast industrial network functioning like a single organism. At the MIT Radiation Laboratory, more than 4,000 scientists pioneered advanced navigation and radar systems, granting American bombers all-weather capability and unprecedented accuracy. When frontline combat exposed the B-17's vulnerability to head-on attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific missions demanded greater range, Consolidated Aircraft modified B-24 bombers without ever halting production. German manufacturers required months, even years to implement comparable changes. America did it in weeks. This adaptability proved every bit as decisive as production volume. American aircraft evolved continuously, shaped by real-time combat feedback from every front. Information flowed from Pacific battlefields to Atlantic assembly lines in a matter of days, driving constant improvement. Meanwhile, German aircraft, built in isolated underground factories by exhausted slave laborists, remained frozen in design as America's planes grew faster, tougher, and smarter with each passing month. The feedback loop between combat and production achieved a level of efficiency the world had never seen. Pilots' observations reached engineers within hours. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. And assembly line workers' suggestions flowed directly back to the designers who shaped the next generation of aircraft. This democratic exchange of information, open, fast, and adaptive, proved far superior to the rigid hierarchy of German command. It was innovation powered not by fear, but by freedom. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring penned his final letter. In it, he offered his most complete admission of the true nature of defeat. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we mocked for making consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht beneath aluminum and steel. His last recorded words to prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert echoed the same realization. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They didn't just outproduce us. They outthought us. They hadn't just built more machines. They had revolutionized production itself. Every element of the American system, from design to delivery, proved superior to anything the Reich could imagine. That night, Hermann Göring took his own life. But his final words remain history's verdict on the production war. The Reich Marshal who once mocked America's factory workers died knowing that a single American plant had produced more aircraft than his entire Luftwaffe ever would. Military historians now agree, industrial might, not strategy or luck, decided the war. Without that overwhelming material power, D-Day could not have been launched, the bombing campaign could not have been sustained, and the Pacific War could never have been won. As historian Richard Overy wrote, the outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the sheer weight of material. The Allies didn't just outfight their enemies. They buried them beneath an avalanche of production. By 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, Axis and Allies alike. This was not mere superiority. It was industrial annihilation, a scale of power so vast that Germany didn't simply face defeat. It faced obliteration. Yet the true significance of America's production miracle reached far beyond military victory. It proved that democracy could outproduce dictatorship, that freedom could outperform tyranny, and that voluntary cooperation was stronger than forced obedience. The men and women who built this arsenal were not slaves, not conscripts, but free citizens, united by conviction and purpose. Hermann Göring's contempt for American industry now stands as one of history's most catastrophic miscalculations. His arrogance, his refusal to see the power of a democratic nation's industrial will, cost Germany the war and millions of lives. Long before the first American bomber crossed into German skies, the Reich's fate was already sealed, not on the battlefield, but in the factories of Detroit, Seattle, and Willow Run. The transformation from 3,000 aircraft a year to 100,000 wasn't just a triumph of machinery, it was a triumph of spirit. When faced with an existential threat, a free society proved it could achieve the impossible. American workers didn't merely meet Roosevelt's impossible goal, they doubled it. They didn't just rival German production, they outproduced it fivefold, while fighting across two oceans at once. This was not only the victory of a nation, it was the vindication of freedom itself. Would you like me to now write the final one-sentence cinematic closing line, the kind that delivers a powerful emotional punch as the screen fades to black? Today's leaders would do well to remember Hermann Göring's fatal mistake. To dismiss democratic nations as weak because they are peaceful, or to underestimate free people because they value prosperity over conquest, is to invite the same kind of catastrophic miscalculation that doomed the Third Reich. In 1940, America appeared unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as front lines, that factory workers could be as vital as soldiers, and that industrial organization could shape victory as surely as battlefield tactics. Göring learned that truth too late, at the cost of his nation's destruction. From his mocking dismissal of Roosevelt's 1940 announcement, to his death at Nuremberg 6 years later, his journey traced the full arc of Nazi Germany's downfall. His contempt for American industry became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, mistook tyranny for strength, and believed that myth could conquer machinery. The Reichsmarschall believed ideology could overcome industrial mathematics. But he died knowing the truth, that in 1944 alone, American factories produced more aircraft than Germany managed during the entire war. His mockery of democratic industry became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total defeat. America built 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the true victory wasn't in the numbers, it was in the method. It proved that free workers could outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation could outperform totalitarian command, and that a nation of immigrants could unite to achieve what tyrants thought impossible. Every B-24 bomber that rolled off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes wasn't just a machine of war. It was democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet was driven by a woman who had been a housewife months earlier. Each engine built by a teenager who left school to serve. Each wing assembled by workers who had once fled poverty and persecution. Together, they proved that free people, united by purpose, could bury tyranny beneath an avalanche of production. Hermann Göring once laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 planes a year. America responded by building twice that many, and in doing so, reshaped global history. His laughter still echoes through time. The hollow sound of catastrophic miscalculation. The fatal dismissal of a democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither freedom nor production. In the end, both buried him, and everything he represented, beneath 300,000 aircraft. The roaring engines of history's most complete defeat.